Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that everything you have ever believed about reality is false. The movement of the stars, the passing of time, birth, death, motion, change. All illusions. Not metaphorically, but literally. Now imagine a philosopher standing in ancient Greece over 2,500 years ago, arguing this with so much terrifyingly logical precision that nearly every major philosopher after him had to answer him. That philosopher was Parmenides, and he may be the most radical metaphysician in the history of Western thought. Because Parmenides did not merely question the world, he questioned whether change itself could possibly exist. The early Greek philosophers, the pre Socratics, were searching for the arche, the fundamental principle underlying reality. Thales believed everything originated from water. Anaximenes proposed air. Heraclitus believed reality was perpetual transformation. Everything flows. For Heraclitus, conflict and change were not accidents of reality, they were reality. Fire became the perfect symbol for existence, always alive, always moving, always consuming itself. In this view, it feels natural. The world appears dynamic. Children grow old, seasons shift, civilization rise and collapse. Everything seems trapped inside an endless process of becoming. Then Parmenides arrives and says something else. No, reality does not change. Not only that, he argued that change is logically impossible. Parmenides was born in the Greek colony of Elea in southern Italy around the early 5th century BCE. Unlike many early thinkers, Parmenides was less interested in physical elements and much more interested in logic itself. His surviving philosophy comes from fragments of a poetic work called On Nature. This is important. Parmenides does not represent his philosophy as casual speculation. He frames it as a revelation. In the poem, he journeys beyond the human world into the divine chariot until he encounters a goddess who unveils the truth of reality itself. And what she reveals, the goddess represents two paths of inquiry. The first path, what is. The second path, what is not. At first, this sounds trivial. Of course, what exists, exists, and of course, non existence does not exist. But Parmenides is about to pull an intellectual nuclear weapon out with this simple observation, because he asks, can you think about nothing? Not emptiness, not darkness, not space. Actual non being, pure nothingness. The moment you attempt to think it, you turn it into something thinkable, which means it is no longer nothing. So for Parmenides, non-being is impossible, and this becomes the foundation for everything that follows. This is where Parmenides becomes very rigorous. If non-being cannot exist, then reality cannot emerge from non-being, which means that nothing can come into existence. And if non-being cannot exist, then reality cannot pass into non-being either, which means that nothing can cease to exist. Suddenly, creation and destruction collapse. Birth becomes impossible. Death becomes impossible. Reality was never created and will never perish. It simply is, eternally. Now, the central argument. What is change? At its core, change means something becomes different from what it once was. A leaf becomes brown. A child becomes an adult. Cold water becomes hot. But Parmenides argues for something to become different, it must in some sense become what it previously was not. And that invokes non-being. But non-being is impossible. Therefore, change itself is impossible. This is one of the most radical conclusions ever reached in philosophy. Because Parmenides is not saying change is difficult to explain, he is saying change cannot logically occur at all. Your senses tell you otherwise, but your senses deceive you. Before Parmenides, observation largely guided inquiry. After Parmenides, reason becomes a weapon capable of overruling perception itself. Parmenides essentially says, I do not care what your eyes tell you. If logic contradicts experience, that experience loses. And this introduces one of the deepest tensions in intellectual history. Rationalism versus empiricism. Should we trust reason? Or should we trust sensory experience? This conflict echoes through centuries of philosophy. You can see it later in Plato, René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, modern mathematics, theoretical physics. Parmenides helped create the idea that reality may fundamentally contradict human intuition. Parmenides now reaches his ultimate conclusion. If reality cannot emerge, perish, divide, or change, then reality must be eternal, indivisible, motionless, complete, unified. Reality is not many things, reality is one. This is the most famous doctrine of eclectic monism. There are no genuine distinctions, no ultimate separations, no empty spaces. Because empty space would be nothing, and nothing cannot exist. So reality must be entirely full, continuous, undivided being. Parmenides even describes being as sphere-like, perfectly complete in all directions. Not lacking anything, not moving anywhere, because movement would imply moving into empty space, which would require non-being, which is impossible. Parmenides' student, Zeno of Elea, became famous for defending these ideas through paradoxes. His goal was to not entertain, it was to prove that ordinary assumptions about motion and plurality produce contradictions. Take Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles gives the tortoise a head start. To overtake it, Achilles must first reach where the tortoise was. But by then the tortoise has moved ahead again, and this repeats infinitely. So how can Achilles ever actually overtake the tortoise? Or consider the arrow paradox. At any single instant, an arrow occupies one fixed position. If every instant is motionless, then where does motion come from? Zeno's paradoxes were attempts to show that motion become absurd when analyzed rationally, and disturbingly, they were so difficult that mathematicians struggled with them for over 2,000 years. No philosopher was more influenced by Parmenides than Plato. Plato realized that eclectic challenge could not simply be ignored. Parmenides had exposed a terrifying problem. How can truth be stable if reality constantly changes? Plato's solution, he split reality into two realms. The physical world, the world of change, imperfect, temporary, and unstable. And the world of forms, the eternal realm of perfect truths, perfect beauty, perfect justice, perfect geometry. These forms never change. In many ways, Plato preserves Parmenides' insight by relocating true reality beyond the sensory world. Aristotle believed Parmenides misunderstood change. Aristotle argued that becoming does not require emergence from non-being. Instead, change is the transition from potentiality to actuality. A seed already possesses the potential to become a tree, so becoming is not creation from nothing, it is fulfillment. This allowed Aristotle to preserve logic while also preserving the reality of motion and change. His response became foundational to medieval philosophy and science. Certain interpretations of modern physics unexpectedly resemble Parmenides. In Einsteinian relativity, time is often modeled as part of a four-dimensional space-time structure. Some philosophers interpret this as the block universe. In this view, past, present, and future all equally exist. The flow of time may be subjective. The universe simply is. This sounds astonishingly eclectic. Even quantum physics raises strange questions about whether reality behaves fundamentally unlike human perception. Parmenides remains disturbingly relevant to this day. The reason Parmenides still matters is not merely historical, it is existential. He forces us to confront an unbearable possibility. What if the human experience is fundamentally deceptive? Not partially deceptive, completely deceptive. What if time is unreal, change is unreal, separation is unreal, individuality is unreal, and beneath the appearances lies only eternal being? This is why Parmenides feels less like an ancient thinker and more like a philosophical singularity. He pushes logic to its absolute limit, especially for its time. And once you follow him there, ordinary reality begins to crack. Before Parmenides, philosophy mostly investigated nature. After Parmenides, philosophy had to investigate existence itself. He transformed metaphysics forever. Even philosophers who rejected him were forced to answer him. And that is the true mark of philosophical greatness. Not that everyone agrees with you, but that nobody can ignore you. Because Parmenides revealed something interesting about reason. If followed ruthlessly enough, logic can destroy the world we think we live in.